I have been invited to participate in a group that does experiments with their worm bins. Some people do human waste, some people do dog and cat poop, and I know a couple of people, they're doing breads, grains, jalapeno peppers, all the no-nos that we are told are not supposed to go into a worm bin because it will harm the worms. And although I maybe agree that large quantities of those things like jalapenos or onions or garlic, things like that, citrus fruits, may not be a good idea, I think when we want to compost our kitchen waste, we want to be able to get rid of all our waste, including the citrus and the onions. And I believe that if we balance everything out with other foods and a lot of bedding, I think we could safely compost just about everything. So I decided to try out the onions in my compost bin because our family does go through a lot of onions, and I would like to be able to compost it safely and not throw it in the garbage. That's basically the idea of why I wanted to start composting with worms in the first place. So today I'm going to harvest another one of my 5-gallon outside buckets. So I dumped all the contents into the small mortar tray here, and I waited for the majority of the worms to go down. This is what I normally do. I have my sifter basket right here. I have my my bin where I keep the compost temporarily, the finished castings here. This is where I sift everything into, and then I have the bin, the new experimental bin, waiting here. I didn't have to prepare it ahead of time, but because the majority of the things that I'm going to put here, including the worms, is already established. I'm not going to put them into a sterile environment. So I'm going to actually use a lot of the material that has not been completely composted with worms, and I'm going to put that into the bin, the experimental bin. I will start feeding it in a week. I will give them a chance to settle in, and then I will feed one side with a few food scraps, but mostly onions, and see what happens. See if the worms stay away from it. For how long do they stay? Does it break down? How quickly does it break down? The smells. And yeah, so hopefully we will get some good results, and I will no longer be worried about putting onions in my worm bins. So right now I'm just going to go through the process of sifting, and I'll come back and show you the amount of worms that I am actually going to put into the new bin, and we'll go from there. As I'm sitting here picking through some of the cocoons and the baby worms to put them back in the bucket, I wanted just to say a few words about eggshells for grit and pH control, the acidity control in the bin. When I just started out, I would crush up my eggshells like this and put them in the bin. But I found first of all that they don't break down that quickly. I mean, this is over a year and they're still in the same shape they went in. That's number one. Number two, the worms cannot really use this for grit, and a lot of people put this in the worm bin for the worms to use as grit in their gizzard to grind up their food. But they can't ingest this. It's too big. They can't do anything with it. They don't have a big mouth, nor do they have teeth. So I started grinding up all my eggshells to almost a fine powder. And then now I have no issues with that. The worms can handle it right away, and it keeps the pH of the bin at neutral, and it actually helps in reproduction. So I would recommend, if you are going to use eggshells for grit, grind it up, and then you won't have to worry about your worms being able to use it. I'm just sitting here picking one by one, picking the worms out. That's what I do. I enjoy this process, of course. That's because I'm a bit on the crazy side with my worms, but you can just as easily, you know, put them through the sifter. We're almost done, and we'll come back to see our new experimental bin when we're ready. So we're done harvesting, and we got some, as usual, some really nice castings. This is what you usually get with the 1/8 inch screen, but you really don't need that fine of a screen. You can go with a 1/4 inch as well. The rest of the worms are back in the bucket, and these are our volunteers. So there are, you know, quite a few of them. I only thought it would be fair to put you know, significant enough a number of worms in there so that they can actually compost. If I have very few worms, then I can't really test out the theory of putting onions in the bin. So there you go, guys. I'm going to put everything in, bedding and the worms. There's a lot of living material here. The bin will be fully inoculated. And the worms will be happier since they are in a new environment. I think I could just dump it now. Yeah. Okay. So here they are in their new home. The bedding is moist, and they will probably go down into it. And I'll leave them alone for a week before I start torturing them with onions. Well, I'm excited to see if we have good results. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.